Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling some really fascinating research on lions in Africa and how humans are impacting their lives in ways we might not expect.
Hmm.
So, we see the nature documentaries, the classic images, but there's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely.
We've got three really interesting sources to dig into today.
Yeah.
First up, we have some information on the Lion Lab, which is part of the University of Minnesota's Lion Center.
Okay.
Then we'll be looking at a study from UCLA focusing on something called human kleptoparasitism, which is fascinating.
Interesting.
And finally, we'll be analyzing a study from the University of Michigan, which was published in Communications Biology. And that study really digs into how lions are adapting their behavior in response to all these different human activities. So our mission today is to understand, the challenges lions face, but go beyond just the usual suspects, habitat loss, poaching. We're really going to uncover the ripple effects of human behavior, climate change, in this complex balance of conservation in a world that's changing really rapidly.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, let's start with the Lion Lab, which, as I mentioned, is dedicated to lion conservation.
Right. The Lion Lab, and especially the work of Craig Packer, has been absolutely essential to our understanding of lion behavior and how we can better protect them. I mean, his work, his research on the Serengeti Lion Project has been going on for decades.
Yeah, and that research is more crucial now than ever because the U.S. has now officially declared African lions as endangered.
Right.
Which I think for a lot of people, that really, hammers home the point that this is a critical situation.
It does.
Now, we all know about the threats that lions face.
Right.
The retaliatory killings by farmers, habitat loss, poaching, trophy hunting.
Right.
These are the things that we hear about all the time. But what I found really interesting in these sources is that there's a whole other layer of problems that are emerging that we might not be as aware of.
It's true. Those big, those threats you mentioned are really important, but there are some other ones that are starting to emerge that we don't really talk about as much.
Exactly. And one of those that we're going to dive into is human kleptoparasitism, which is the focus of that UCLA study.
Okay.
So for those of us who aren't familiar with the term, what exactly does that mean?
So basically, kleptoparasitism is when one animal steals food from another. So in this case, we're talking about humans taking food that lions have killed.
Okay, so essentially stealing their kills.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this isn't a brand new thing.
Right.
Communities have been doing this for centuries.
Yeah.
But the problem is it seems to be becoming more and more frequent in some areas.
Oh, wow.
And that's what's really worrying.
Yeah. I can see how, if a lion attacks someone's livestock, they might try to reclaim what's left of their animal. Yeah. But why would anyone risk messing with a lion to take, a wild animal carcass?
Well, I mean, there are a few reasons. Sometimes it really is about reclaiming livestock.
Right.
Maybe a lion has killed a cow or a goat.
Mm-hmm.
But other times it's more opportunistic, like they just see a free meal.
Oh, wow.
Why not take it, right? And then sometimes there are also cultural factors involved. But, one of the most shocking things from this UCLA study was that in 50% of the cases, people were actually taking kills of wild prey.
Wait, so half the time they weren't even protecting their own animals?
Yeah. It's not about protecting their herds or anything like that.
So it's like we're directly competing with lions for food now.
That's exactly what it looks like. And, maybe it's because resources are becoming more and more scarce, but it does raise some big questions about how this impacts lion populations.
Yeah. So we've got lions facing pressure from humans taking their food on top of all the other threats to their habitat and everything else. How are they even coping with all this?
Well, that's where that University of Michigan study comes in. They did research across a bunch of different locations, and what they found is that in over 2/3 of the sites, lions were actively avoiding areas with human activity.
Oh, wow. So they're basically trying to stay out of our way as much as possible.
It seems that way. And what's even more interesting is that they're also changing when they hunt, becoming more nocturnal to avoid running into us.
So they're shifting to hunting more at night.
Exactly.
But aren't lions mostly daytime hunters?
Yeah, they are. They're diurnal, which means they're most active during the day.
Right.
Their eyes, their hunting strategies, it's all built for daylight. But now, because we're encroaching on their daytime hours so much, they're having to adapt. And that's where the ecosystem problems can start to arise.
Yeah. Their whole, system is designed for daylight. But as humies are, kind of taking over more and more of their daytime hours, they're forced to change their behavior and hunt at night, and that has all kinds of, potential consequences.
Right. Yeah, because, I mean, if they're hunting at night, it's not just the lions that are affected, right? Exactly. It's not just about the lions having to adjust their schedule.
Yeah.
It's like throwing a pebble into a pond.
Uh-huh.
You create these ripples that spread out and impact everything in the ecosystem.
Yeah. So are you saying that, like, the prey animals might start changing their behavior too? Like becoming more nocturnal themselves to try to avoid the lions?
Yeah, exactly. Some prey animals might shift to being more active at night, which then has a knock-on effect on their own feeding patterns and how they interact with other species.
Wow, it's like a chain reaction.
It really is. And then you've got other predators that are naturally more nocturnal, like hyenas and leopards.
Right.
So if lions are out hunting at night more often, it kind of throws off the balance of competition between them.
Yeah, it's like a whole new set of challenges are created.
Exactly. So it's not just about, humans killing lions directly. It's also about how we're indirectly forcing them to change their behavior.
Yeah, and those changes can have these huge ripple effects across the whole ecosystem.
They really can. And, for lions themselves, this adaptation comes at a cost.
Right, because they're not as well equipped to hunt at night.
Exactly. They're more likely to get injured and maybe not be as successful at catching prey.
And if they're not catching enough prey,
Yeah.
that could lead to food shortages.
Definitely. And, when food becomes scarce, that can trigger infighting within a pride.
Right, makes them weaker overall, more susceptible to disease.
Exactly. It's like this downward spiral.
It's amazing how many layers there are to this issue. We hear about habitat loss and human-wildlife conflict, but this adds a whole other dimension to the conversation about protecting lions. And then, we can't forget about the potential health risks to humans, too.
Right.
Earlier we were talking about how that UCLA article mentioned the risks of people consuming meat from lion kills.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What impacts animals often ends up impacting us, too.
Absolutely.
And then there's another big factor that we can't ignore.
Which is?
Climate change. That University of Michigan study actually mentioned it as a key factor influencing lion behavior.
Oh, right, because climate change is affecting everything these days.
It really is. It's like adding fuel to the fire for both people and wildlife. As rainfall patterns shift and droughts become more frequent, resources become scarce and unpredictable for everyone.
So both humans and animals are kind of struggling to find what they need.
Exactly. And that just increases the chances of humans and lions coming into contact. They're both looking for food and water in the same places.
Right. So it's like a perfect storm brewing then. Limited resources, human encroachment, and climate change all kind of converging at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a pretty daunting challenge for these lions to face.
It really is. But, there is hope.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, we have to start by really understanding how complicated this problem is. We can't just rely on those simple solutions anymore. We need to think more holistically about how we can protect lions while also respecting the needs of the people who live alongside them. Like the Lion Lab is doing some amazing work trying to achieve that kind of balance.
Yeah, and how does that work in practice? How do you balance protecting a predator like a lion with the needs of local communities?
Well, one approach is focusing on sustainable land management practices. Things that minimize habitat fragmentation.
Okay.
And create wildlife corridors so lions can move safely between protected areas.
So giving them space to roam without constantly bumping into humans and livestock.
Right.
That makes sense. But what about when encounters do happen? How do you prevent lions from preying on livestock?
Well, there are some pretty simple things you can do, like improving enclosures to make them more predator-proof.
Okay.
Or setting up early warning systems. So communities know if lions are active in the area and can take steps to protect their animals. And in some cases, it might even involve providing compensation.
Oh, like if someone loses livestock to a lion attack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It helps reduce the economic burden on communities.
Right. And that would hopefully make them less likely to retaliate against the lions.
That's the idea. But I think one of the most important things is education. We need to help people understand that lions are not just a threat, they're a vital part of the ecosystem.
So it's about shifting from a mindset of conflict to one of coexistence.
Exactly.
And that means empowering local communities to be involved in conservation efforts.
Right. They need to have a voice in the decisions that affect them and their environment.
It sounds like there's a lot of work being done, but are we making real progress? What does the future hold for lions?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one we'll explore in the last part of our deep dive.
So we've uncovered this really complex web of threats facing lions, And now the big question is, what does the future hold for these incredible creatures?
Well, predicting the future is always a challenge, especially when we're talking about something as complex as lion conservation.
Yeah.
But I think if we look at the trends that we're seeing and consider, different scenarios, we can at least get a sense of what might be coming.
So based on everything we've discussed so far, the challenges seem pretty daunting.
They are.
Are we looking at a future where lions disappear from the wild completely?
It's not impossible, and that's the really sad part.
Yeah.
If things keep going the way they are, the habitat loss, the conflict with humans, the pressures of climate change, lions could definitely vanish from huge areas of their current range.
Wow.
Some experts even believe that without some major intervention, wild lion populations could face extinction within our lifetime.
That's a heartbreaking thought, to imagine Africa without the roar of lions echoing across the savannah.
It would be a huge loss, not just for biodiversity, but for the health of those ecosystems as a whole.
Right, because they're such a key part of the food chain.
They are, they're apex predators, which means they play a critical role in regulating the populations of their prey. If they disappear, it could trigger a domino effect throughout the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Potentially leading to imbalances that could cause a collapse.
Yeah. It's hard to even imagine what that would look like. But we've also talked about the amazing work that's being done.
Yes.
Organizations like the Lion Lab and so many dedicated people on the ground are fighting to protect lions.
Yes, they are.
So surely there's some hope there.
Absolutely. The future isn't written yet. It depends on the choices that we make, the actions that we take. And there really is a growing movement of scientists, conservationists, local communities, even governments working to change things.
So if we could paint a picture of that brighter future, what needs to happen? What are the key things that need to change to ensure lions can continue to survive in the wild?
Well, one of the most important things is protecting and restoring their habitat. That means expanding protected areas, making them stronger, creating those wildlife corridors that we talked about to connect fragmented landscapes, and also promoting land use practices that are more sustainable and minimize human impact on the ecosystems that lions need.
So it's not just about setting aside land for them. It's about making sure that land is healthy and can support thriving populations.
Exactly. And that also means tackling issues like prey depletion, poaching, human-wildlife conflict. It really requires a multifaceted approach, working with local communities to find solutions that benefit both people and lions.
Right. Earlier, we were discussing some of those community-based solutions, like improving livestock enclosures, the early warning systems, compensation for livestock losses.
Yeah.
Those seem like really tangible steps in the right direction.
They are, but I think it goes beyond those practical solutions.
Okay.
We need to empower those communities, help them become stewards of their own natural resources.
Yeah, so give them a real voice in the conservation decisions that affect them.
Right, and provide them with the tools and knowledge they need to manage wildlife sustainably. It's about changing that whole paradigm from conflict to coexistence.
And that takes building trust, fostering respect between those communities and conservation organizations.
It does.
Recognizing that, lions are important culturally, economically, and finding ways to align conservation goals with the values of those local communities.
Exactly. But we can't forget about the elephant in the room. Funding.
Right.
No matter how good our conservation efforts are, they need resources to actually succeed.
So more financial support from governments, international organizations, private donors. Everybody needs to chip in.
Yes, everybody. It's a shared responsibility, and it's not just about money either.
Okay.
We need political will. Governments need to prioritize lion conservation. They need to put strong policies in place that protect lions and their habitat, and they need to enforce those policies.
Right.
And they need to address the root causes of habitat loss and human-wildlife conflict.
Like unsustainable land use practices and climate change. It sounds like we need a real shift in thinking, understanding that those short-term gains from exploiting natural resources can have these long-term consequences that are just devastating for everyone.
You got it. We need to recognize that lions are so much more than just animals. They're an iconic symbol of Africa. They're a keystone species. They're vital to maintaining healthy ecosystems, and they inspire awe and wonder in people all over the world.
Like protecting them is protecting ourselves, protecting our planet, protecting the future that we want to leave for future generations.
I love that. The future of lions is in our hands. The choices we make today are going to determine whether these amazing creatures continue to roam free or if they just fade into memory.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from this conversation?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that knowledge is power. You've taken the time to learn about these complex issues, and that's a huge first step. Now it's about using that knowledge to make a difference.
Right? Stay curious. Keep learning. Share what you've discovered with others. Support organizations that are doing great work like the Lion Center. Advocate for change. Make choices in your own life that contribute to a more sustainable future.
Yes. Even small actions, when multiplied by millions of people, can have a big impact.
Absolutely. And I think, we've been focused on Africa today, but lions aren't the only large carnivores facing these kinds of challenges.
That's true.
So think about your own corner of the world.
Yeah.
What's happening there? Are there similar dynamics at play between humans and wildlife? That's a deep dive worth taking.
It is.
Well, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.